Form 1 students, this is Miss Zheng, one of the Form 1 English teachers. Once again, welcome to MPL and hope you guys are having fun for your first cycle in the school. Anyways, today I'll be doing a question analysis on the two urban myths, the choking Alsatian and the vanishing hitchhiker. Please get your stationery, tutti frutti, and notebook ready with you to jot down everything you need to know before working on your literature essay. So for the literature essay questions, though it is referred to as literature essay, but you don't exactly have to write an essay for the literature assignments or exams. There will be two questions in your assignments or exams. They are the Part A question, which focuses on testing your understanding on the content, your creativity, thinking, and your knowledge on a particular text type. And the Part B question, which focuses on testing your knowledge on literary features or techniques. Together, they are going to take up 20 marks. These are the two questions that you will be working on for your first literature assignment. For Part A question, it requires you to show understanding on the urban myths through writing a diary entry from the character's point of view, whereas Part B requires you to compare how realistic the two short stories are. Let's take a closer look of the Part A question. Write a diary entry in at least 100 words from the point of view of Megan in A Choking Alsatian, or the main character in A Vanishing Hitchhiker. So based on the question, we know that this time the text type we are focusing on is a diary entry. The reasons why people write a diary entry is when they want to record or recount event or experiences happened on a day. Usually, these experiences or events will be something that triggers strong feelings or emotions in them, so people also express a lot of their feelings and thoughts in a diary entry. Because in diary, you're trying to talk about things that have already happened, you should be using past tense, except when you are recapping the conversations, in which you should be using present tense or present continuous tense. The writer of this entry will be a character from the story, so you'll be writing as if you are that character. That means you should be writing in the first person point of view, using I, me, or my, or even we, us, or our, which are all first person pronouns. As for the target audience, that is the person who is going to read your diary entry, will be no one but yourself. You should sound more chill, informal, and casual. And to achieve such a casual and informal tone, you can consider making more use of short forms, abbreviations, question tags, interjection, etc. In a diary entry, you are also expected to be descriptive. You are using more adjectives, adverbs, and action verbs to recount what happened during the day, so that when you read back your diary entries later, you can actually remember the most significant thing happened that day. You should also sound more expressive in talking about your feelings. Before we move on to talk about the content of the diary, let's have a little recap on the structure of a diary entry. So there are 4 parts that we must include in a diary, and the dark gray box is more or less optional. Do you remember what they are? First, you start off your diary entry with date and also weather. Second, you can make it sound like your diary is your imaginary friend by addressing it with Dear Diary. But of course, this is optional. Third, you'll be having an opening paragraph in which you'll be talking about how you generally feel about the day, or briefly talk about what is the most significant thing happened on the day. You can also consider talking about how your day started normally, just like any other typical days, but something happened that brought a twist to your day. For your main body, you should at least have 2 paragraphs to talk about what happened in a day in chronological order, starting from the first event happened, then the second, then the third. Remember to avoid using too many lines to talk about events that happen every single day, like brushing your teeth, eating breakfast, but you can write more lines to describe events that are significant. Instead of just listing out what happened during the day, you should express how you felt throughout the day from time to time. Start a new paragraph whenever there's a change or new development of the event or of an experience. For the closing paragraph, you can summarize your experience a bit and reflect on what you have got from the day, like the lesson that you learned, the change that you have made because of today's experience. You may also choose to end your diary by saying bye to your diary, similar to how you do in the closing paragraph in a personal letter. So after knowing about the structure, it's time for us to brainstorm what we should be including in the diary entry. As you are writing a diary entry from the character's point of view, what's better than reading about what happened to them on the day we are writing? Let's take a look at the first two paragraphs on page 46. Megan had always wanted a dog, preferably a big ferocious dog that would make her feel safe at night, blah 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 blah. And then the next paragraph talking about how Megan chose to break up with Alex and move to Australia. And then take a look of the last paragraph of page 47. One day, coming back from work, Megan was disappointed and a little worried to find that Bruno had not bounded up to greet her as he always did, and then continue on. So actually, which part should we be using to start our diary entry with? Obviously, because in a diary, we are only talking about our experience on one day. So instead of starting with that's Megan's background information, you should focus on the day when the main events happen. How you went to work and returned home, seeing how weird Bruno the Alsatian was. You could even talk about what happened at work and how tired you were from work. Remember to put yourself into Megan's shoes as if you were here and think about how she would be feeling having all these experiences. Now let's take a look at the last paragraph on page 48 to page 49. Please, Megan, he was shouting now. It's nothing to do with the dog. At least it is, but anyway, that doesn't matter. Just promise me you'll get the hell out of here. If I hear you speak again, instead of running to your car, I'm going to get angry. Okay? So instead of copying the whole conversation which goes on in the story, you can be summarizing what the vet has said and focus on how you feel as Megan. As you read on to the second paragraph, you can see that Megan was actually silent and kind of out of breath after listening to the vet. So instead of just saying that you were silent in your diary, you can be explaining how you felt listening to what the vet said on the phone. As for the last line of the story, suddenly the line went dead. You should be elaborating on what happened after the phone call. Why did the line go dead? Who was there in the house? And what happened to you, aka Megan, at last? If you are choosing to attempt the question using the vanishing hitchhiker, note that your identity here is a friend of a friend, who's a man. Again, the diary should be written on the day when you tried to return the coat to the woman, after you experienced and knew about everything. You can also elaborate more from the point of view of the main character. For instance, in the story, you can see the line, he was quite attracted to her, and he tried to get her talking, without any details, description, or conversation. So in your diary entry, you can talk about how the woman looked like and how you tried to initiate a conversation for the main character. You should also be creating your own ending after knowing about the truth that the woman that you drove the other day was actually dead. Now that you have grasped the idea of what to write in part A, let's carry on to part B. Which story is more realistic as an urban myth? Give 2 reasons and examples from the story. So before we discuss and compare the 2 stories in terms of how realistic they are, we have to think about why is an urban myth different from just any horror stories or movies. The key that makes an urban myth so much scarier than a regular horror story is that usually it has a real life setting, which makes the event happened in the story closer to us. They may happen to us because the characters in the urban myths also experience the same thing in a place that actually exists in the real world, not just the fictional world. Another thing about urban myths is that, unlike a horror story, we usually don't get to know what happens to the characters in the end of the story. That creates suspense and so many possibilities to what will happen to the characters. But then, what makes an urban myth more realistic than the other one? If you look at the example from the choking Alsatian, we get to know more about the details in the story. We know that the main character is called Megan and that she's living in Queensland, Australia, and that she moves there and gets a new dog after breaking up with her ex-boyfriend Alex. But for the Vanishing Hitchhiker, we don't even know what the name of the characters are. Without enough details, the urban myths will not be realistic enough, and it will be difficult for readers to put themselves into the shoes of the characters as if they are also experiencing the spooky event in the story. So you can be structuring your answer in this way. Starting with your main idea, the choking Alsatian is more realistic than the Vanishing Hitchhiker because it includes more details in terms of setting and the background of characters. And then we will continue with examples to support your main idea. In The Choking Alsatian, Megan is a very vivid character as we know about her past of breaking up with her ex-boyfriend and her reasons to relocate in Queensland, Australia. The events happened in the story also shows a clear time frame. For example, we know that Megan has moved to Australia for several weeks already. However, in the Vanishing Hitchhiker, we know nothing, not even the name about the main character in the story. So because you're going to compare which story is more realistic, so you have to provide examples from both the Choking Alsatian and the Vanishing Hitchhiker. Lastly, you should end your answer with elaboration, highlighted in blue. With more details provided on the characters and the setting, it is easier for us to imagine what happens to the characters and put ourselves into the shoes of the characters as if we are also experiencing the events in the story. Make sure that you don't copy my answer and think of 2 other reasons supporting examples and elaboration for part B. So this brings us to the end of this video. Hope that this has given you some insights and ideas how you should be attempting the new question type. If you have any question, please approach